Hello, everybody, and welcome to BLovelyAndGLam Podfic. This will be a reading of Chapter 1 of Seeking, a My School President SoundWin fic. Here's the summary. Every siren has a special song called their seeking song that only their mate can hear. Every siren except Sound, whose song has remained unanswered for so long that his friends teasingly call his the silent song. Will Sound's song truly remain unanswered? Or will the confusing yet charming sailor that he met under the moonlight change everything? This is a 6-chapter fic with about 36,500 words. I'm the author of it, and you can find the original on AO3 if you're interested in that. And without any further ado, let's get started. Chapter 1. Last night, Gun had to save Win's life. Save him from stepping right off the side of the boat and into the ocean without even glancing back. This morning, things were a little awkward around the breakfast table. "I didn't tell anyone," Gun said quietly, so that only Win could hear, as their table mates were distracted by a commotion on the other side of the galley. "Thanks," Win muttered, not looking up from his bowl of porridge. "Listen, tonight—" "It's fine," Win interrupted irritably. "I'm sure it was just a one-time thing. Don't worry about it." Gun nodded and decided to stay quiet as he watched his friend absent-mindedly scratch at his red-tipped ears. The night before had been a bit of a shock to the both of them, and neither of them really knew how to talk about it. They'd often heard tales about things like sea monsters, mermaids, and even sirens. But who actually believes any of those stories? They thought they were just silly stories that the older seafarers would tell each other at night to stave off their boredom or to frighten the younger, newer boys. Honestly, Gun still wasn't convinced. How could he be? He didn't hear or see anything. For all he knew, Win was playing a joke on him. But something about the look in Win's eyes when he told Gun what he had heard made Gun feel like he should believe him. Win had heard something that Gun couldn't. Had heard something that made him almost walk right off the side of their ship. Gun still didn't know what, though. When he had finally managed to grab Win and shake him from whatever trance he was in, the only thing Win said was, "You didn't hear him?" while looking at Gun with dazed eyes. Then Win lost consciousness for a few minutes. When he woke again, he refused to answer any of Gun's questions. He just said, "It's fine, I'm fine," over and over again until Gun had no choice but to give up. Tonight, Gun would watch over Win and listen carefully. Maybe he too could hear him and understand what happened to Win last night. For most of the day, Gun watched his friend, watched to see if he was acting any differently, especially any time any of Win's duties took him close to the deck's edge. Finally, Win got fed up and turned on his friend. "I'm not gonna jump, okay?" he hissed, trying not to be heard by the others. "So stop watching me like a worried mother." "Sorry," Gun said, and gently punched Win's shoulder. Win shoved Gun back with a smirk, and they both decided to drop it. They walked over to talk with the others, who were chatting about what food they wanted to eat next time they were at port. Of course, Por was once again trying to convince them all that they should get pork, when the first mate too came out of the captain's quarters. They quickly pretended to be immersed in their work. Gun scrubbed really hard at an imaginary spot on the railing. Win pretended to be moving some boxes. Yo picked up the mop he had abandoned earlier and started to use it again, and Por gathered up some rags to take to the washing area. Tew watched the men, all obviously pretending to work, and just smirked at their antics. What a mess of a crew they had gathered, he thought to himself, not for the first time. As the small man with his arms full of rags passed by him, he smiled up at Tew and said, "Good morning, sir," brightly, before continuing on. Tew watched as one rag slipped from the pile and fluttered down to the deck. The passing sailor didn't seem to have noticed because he continued to walk, without even a break in his stride, leaving the rag in his wake. Tew chuckled to himself, picked up the rag, and followed Por in the direction of the washing area. The rest of the day continued on much the same as any other day. Besides Win and Gun, it was clear that no one in the crew had any clue of what had happened the night before, so the two of them acted normal as well. That night, When everyone had settled into their hammocks in the sleeping quarters, Win couldn't sleep. His mind was too restless. He eventually gave up on sleep, quietly slipping out of his hammock and tiptoeing past the others through the sleeping quarters and up onto the deck. On the deck, he took a moment to breathe in the salty ocean breeze and the crisp night air. With the moon a few days out from being full, it was quite well lit for the late hour. Feeling comfort in the fresh sea air, he walked over to the ship's edge to look out at the world around him. Win leaned over with his elbows resting on the railing, looking out at the vast ocean before him. He wasn't sure how long he stood there in silent meditation, breathing in the crisp air and listening to the gentle slaps of the waves on the side of the ship. He was just about to stand up and head back down into the sleeping quarters when he heard a faint splash below. He glanced down and saw the flash of a soft, pale blue color that stood out from the deep, nearly black navy of the nighttime ocean. And before his brain could even catch up, he was already jumping into action. "Hey!" he called out, not too loudly so as not to wake the whole crew, as he jumped into the rowboat hanging in its place on the side of the ship and started lowering it down into the water. He glanced down and could see the one who was fleeing stop in surprise at his voice. "Wait there!" he said again, moving the ropes as quickly as he could without making too much noise and waking the entire ship. The small rowboat splashed into the water, and Win searched around him for the other man, but Win couldn't see him anymore. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. Why had he wasted all that effort bringing down the rowboat for a hallucination? But out of the corner of his eye, he just barely glimpsed the flash of that pale blue color. With quick reflexes, he reached out before it could get away from him again. Ow! What the fuck? Win didn't know what surprised him more, the voice or the feeling under his fingertips. He had expected to be grabbing a strip of fabric. He wasn't prepared for the smooth bumps of scales over powerful muscles that his fingers encountered. He wasn't prepared to grab a tail. His fingers almost slipped off the sleek surface as it moved to break free, but he lunged forward to grasp it firmly with both of his hands and held on tight, gritting his teeth to fight against the strong kicks of the writhing, angry fins between his fingers. He didn't know what he was holding on so desperately for, but he couldn't let go now. "Will you just let go?" An angry voice hissed from somewhere in front of him, and the tail was wrenched from his grip so easily as if he wasn't even holding on to it. Win looked down at his hands in confusion, when suddenly he was face to face with a very beautiful, angry face. The boy had reared up out of the water, gripped him by the front of the collar, and yanked Win so that he was practically dangling over the edge of the boat. "What the fuck are you trying to do to me? Give me one reason why I shouldn't kill you right now." The face hissed at him. Win was quite literally too stunned to speak. He just stared at this beautiful boy mere inches from his nose. He stared into those big eyes that were glaring at him. His eyes traced the soft cheeks and full lips and thought to himself that he had never seen a man this beautiful before. His glance moved back up to the eyes and the thick eyebrows that were fully knit into a grumpy line. He wanted to say something. He needed to say something, but he had no words. Externally, he had frozen in a state of serenity. Internally, his heart was pounding in his ears, and his whole body felt like it was screaming. "Hey, are you even listening to me?" the siren growled, shaking him irritably. But still, Win didn't respond. The siren was at a loss. How could this foolish human be so calm in his hands without even a hint of fear? On the contrary, the sailor's deep, soulful eyes and intense gaze were even starting to make him nervous for some reason. Every muscle in the siren's body was tense with a sense of danger. But why? He knew that he was in every way stronger and more capable than this man. He could easily overpower him whenever he wanted. Could have easily pulled out of his grip and swam away the second he tried to grab him. So why didn't he? Why is he still here? And why is he feeling this rising panic? Ugh, what a waste of time. he scoffed, and suddenly put his hands to Win's chest, shoving hard. Win crashed messily onto the floor of the rowboat with a big whoomph sound. Laying there on his back, a bit dazed, he could hear that the other boy was still there. "Don't go," he grunted as he tried to push himself up into a sitting position. "I'm sorry about your tail. I was just trying to stop you from leaving." "And why would you do that?" came the voice, noticeably farther away. From the added distance in the voice, it's clear to Win that the siren had been about to leave. The siren had wanted to leave, was planning to leave, but curiosity won over him in the end. He couldn't help wanting to see more of this strange boy who wasn't at all afraid of him. He was oddly drawn to the way the boy stubbornly challenged his strength despite not having any chance of ever winning against him. Something about this boy's tenacity and intensity intrigued him, so he decided to hear the sailor's answer. Sitting up more quickly to look out at the water and find the siren again. "I don't know," Win answered honestly, rubbing the back of his head. He often did things without thinking first. It just felt like the right thing to do at the time, so he did it. He didn't want him to leave, so we stopped him. That was it. He looked around left and right, but didn't see the other boy anymore. After a few moments of silence and no sign of the other boy, resigned to thinking he'd left, Win sighed in frustration. "Aren't you afraid?" came the voice from behind him. "Should I be?" Win tried to pretend nonchalance by not even turning around to look, but his heartbeat was pounding wildly at the sound of that soft voice. "Okay, listen, asshole." This time, Win turned to look at him. "Besides maybe a bruise on the butt from throwing me a little hard, you haven't actually done anything to me. You even tried to get away from me, remember? I was the one who wanted you to stay, so why should I be scared?" "Are you stupid?" "Okay, now who's the asshole?" Win chuckled and let out a small breath of relief. It sounds like the other boy wasn't going anywhere this time, so he let himself relax a little. The boy just rolled his eyes at that. "Well, if you, a sailor, sees someone like me and is not only not scared, but actually comes and talks to me, you're either stupid or suicidal. So which are you?" Win shrugged and settled into a more comfortable position. "Like I said, I don't think you'll hurt me. You've had plenty of chances to do so already. I'm pretty defenseless here in this little boat." Win stretches his arms out wide with a grin. "You're weird," the boy in the water said, hiding a matching smile as he folded his arms on the side of the rowboat and rested his chin on top of them, his eyes seeming to search Win as if looking for the answers to a number of questions. "Actually, I'm Win. And what's your name?" he said with a smirk and a raised eyebrow. "Sound." "Ha! That's a perfect name for a siren," Win said with a teasing voice. "So you do know?" "Of course I do. I even touched your tail." At his words, Sound's ears turned pink and he looked away. "Yeah, well, don't do that again." "Can I see it?" "My tail?" Sound asked, confused. "Yeah, I didn't really get to see it the first time." Sound considered for a moment before pushing away from the boat a few feet. Then he stopped. How was he supposed to show it? Should he just put his tail in the air and his head underwater? That would look weird, right? Lay backwards and lift it forwards? Would Win even be able to see it? Sound floated still in the water, deep in contemplation for several minutes. "Did you change your mind?" Win called out, confused about why it was taking so long. "Just wait a second," Sound snapped. Finally, he just decided to lean to the side and lift his tail so that it just barely came above the surface of the water, as if he were laying across a rock. Wind's breath caught, and time seemed to slow, as rivulets of water trickled down and the moonlight danced and reflected off of Sound's opalescent scales. Different dazzling shades of pale blues and aquamarines rippled down the length of the tail, with some darker blue patterns swirled in around the bottom. There were two smaller, delicate fins around his hips. Both these smaller fins and the large tail fin reminded Win of the wings of a delicate and rare butterfly, with dark blue designs sprinkled intricately over them. The delicate ends gently flowed and fluttered in the breeze, making Win curious about how they must look in the ocean's currents. Sound grew shy under Wind's intense gaze and hastily lowered his tail back under the water's surface, clearing his throat. He returned back to his previous spot beside the rowboat, and there was a moment of awkward silence between them. So, Wind started casually, staring up at the stars and not looking over at the beautiful boy next to him. Did you try to kill me last night? Wind felt the shock coming from Sound, but he didn't look over. He just kept calmly looking up at the constellations and waited for a response. What do you mean? Sound said, with so much caution and focus that it made Wind look at him. Last night, my friend said I was in some kind of trance, and I almost walked off the side of the ship. I remember hearing singing, but that's about it. So, was that you? Sound's face went pale, and he immediately bolted up from his relaxed position. I have to go. And before Win could say anything else, he disappeared beneath the water. Win watched the spot where he had disappeared for a few minutes before sitting back in the rowboat to think. That wasn't the reaction he was expecting. He thought it could go one of three ways. 1, Sound would say that it was him and apologize. 2, Sound would say it was a different siren. 3, Sound would say it was him and would sing again and Wind would die. That third one was obviously not going to happen, so it was really down to one of the first two. Yet, Sound hadn't done any of those things. His reaction left Win with so many questions. Why would he look so shocked like that? What could Win have said that was possibly shocking to a siren? Shouldn't Win, the plain old human sailor, be the one in shock right now? Sound was right. Why wasn't Win even a little bit scared? Why instead was he sitting here so calmly in a rowboat looking up at the stars thinking dreamily about the pretty eyes of a sharp-tongued siren? Gunn had watched Win hop into the rowboat. He wanted to stop him, but decided against it. Unlike last night, his friend wasn't in a trance. He was acting on his own decisions. So who was Gunn to stop him? So Gunn stayed back and didn't interfere. He just hoped that his friend came back safely. As he turned to walk back towards the sleeping quarters, he bumped into a broad chest. Oh, sorry, Captain! Gunn looked up into the handsome face of the captain and immediately took 2 steps back. What were you doing? The captain said, no anger or reprimand in his voice. Gunn glanced over at the spot where the rowboat was missing and panicked. If the captain noticed, would Win get into trouble? Couldn't sleep. I thought I'd come out for some fresh air and to look at the stars, he said, guiding the captain's eyes toward the sky. Would you like to walk with me? The captain asked softly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Huh? I was also going for a walk. Would you like to join me? Oh, sure. Gunn took one more worried glance back at the spot where he last saw Win and followed the tall, handsome captain towards the back of the ship. Shit, 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 shit! That's all Sound could think, repeating it over and over again as he swam as far away from that rowboat as he could in a state of pure panic. After swimming mindlessly for what felt like hours, he finally stopped and looked around him. He was about an hour away from home, and he could tell it was almost morning. He sighed, turned in the direction of his place, and swam home, his head full of complicated thoughts the whole way. This couldn't actually be happening, right? He had misheard, right? Or maybe there's another explanation. Yeah, there must be another explanation. Sound tried to convince himself of that. But deep down, he knew the truth. He knew exactly what had happened last night. And the meaning of what Win had said, even if Win had no idea, Sound knew, because Sound was a siren. This was something only sirens truly knew. Humans know about siren songs and their deadly powers. What they didn't know is that sirens have many songs. Among these, one of the most important is the seeking song. Each seeking song is unique to that siren. Sound had only ever heard his own seeking song, because there's a special trait to seeking songs. Only the siren and their mate can hear it, which is why it's been named the seeking song. When a siren sings their seeking song, it's as if they're loudly calling out to their mate, I am here, I want to see you. A special message that only the two of them can hear. Last night, Sound had not sang just any random siren song. He had not tried to lure any sailor or other sirens to him. He had been feeling lonely, and, as he often did in times of loneliness, he had sang his seeking song to himself. Sound had long ago given up on thinking of it as a seeking song. After watching all of his friends, and even those younger than him, find their mates, it seemed as if maybe his song was not built for two. So his friends nicknamed it the Silent Song, because whenever he sang it, they just saw his lips moving in silence. But he personally called it Sound Song, because it was his, and his alone. Or at least, that's what he had thought. Sound finally made it home a little before morning. He threw himself into bed and out of pure exhaustion fell instantly into a fitful sleep. All of his dreams were full of a handsome sailor with thick eyebrows and a teasing voice. Sound woke up with his head still full of questions. Win had heard Sound's song. He had heard Sound's seeking song. Win was Sound's mate. How the hell was that supposed to work? Win was human. Sound got up and went to swim around and think, hoping to clear his head. But the more he tried to think, the more confused and frustrated he became. Sound rubbed his face in frustration as if he could physically rub the racing thoughts out of his brain. Ugh! He let out a loud grunt of frustration and moved his hands into his hair. Well, somebody sounds happy. Leave him alone, Ten. Okay, Tirak. Sound opened his eyes to the sight of his two best friends a few feet away swimming towards him. Tan was snuggling up to Fang's shoulder while Fang just rolled his eyes at his mate's antics. Tan had been Sound's best friend since childhood. Sound had only met Fang about a year ago when Tan fell head over heels in love with him and somehow pulled him into their friend group. The two of them seemed like an odd pair at first because Tan is very loud and affectionate, and Fang is a lot more reserved. But if you look more closely, you can see just how fond Fang is of Tan. Sound wasn't sure when they first decided to try singing their seeking song together, but now he often catches their lips moving in a silent song that's just for them when they think he's not looking. Sound is truly happy for them, but he's always felt a little lonely as the one without a mate. Well, maybe he has a mate now? He grimaced again at the thought. So tell us, what's going on? Fang said, crossing his arms and leveling his gaze at Sound, with an attitude that says he will not be dropping the subject. As both a mate and a friend, he is a fierce protector of those he loves, and he can tell that Sound is not okay. Sound said, not knowing how to start. There's so much to talk about, but his brain is a mess. What do you know about seeking songs? Seeking songs? Ten repeated his words as he and Fang glanced at each other. Same as you. We each have one. They match with our mate, who is the only other siren who can hear them. This is all stuff we learned in grade school, Sound. Why are you asking now? Right. Sirens, Sound muttered, chewing on his lower lip. What's actually going on? Fang said, his voice both gentle and firm, reaching out and pulling on Sound's chin so he stops biting his lip. Have you ever heard of a siren having a human mate? Sound said with a grimace. Human? They both repeated in surprise, glancing at each other, and Sound just nodded in response. Where did that idea come from? Tan laughed and threw an arm around Sound's shoulder, but Fang continued to study Sound's face with a look of concern. It's nothing. Sound forced a laugh and put on an air of nonchalance. I guess I was just thinking about my sound song again. You think the reason your seeking song is still silent is because your mate is human? I suppose it's not impossible. Why don't we try asking Tan's grandfather? He might know if there's been a siren and human mate pair before. They all agreed on the plan and decided to head over there right away, since they had nothing else to do at that moment. Sound swam slightly behind, watching his two best friends, noticing how the tips of their purple and yellow tails gracefully curve and wrap around each other and move in perfect sync as they swim. watching the way Tan reached out for Fang's hand and how Fang smiled at his mate as their fingers intertwined. Over the past year, he'd gotten used to seeing their affection. He didn't even mind it, really. They just looked so happy together. How could he say anything? But now, a small kernel of doubt and fear rose in Sound's chest. Would he never experience that? Would he never know how it feels to swim side by side in perfect sync with his mate? Despite saying he was okay with not having a mate, he'd always secretly held hope that his mate was just in some far off sea and it was just taking a little longer for them to meet. He never imagined something as unusual as this. Sound shook his head and tried to stop the stress from building up again. He was sure Tan's grandfather would have answers for him. Tan's grandfather was the oldest and wisest siren in this part of the world. If he didn't know, then no one did. So Sound took a deep breath and caught up to swim beside his friends, nudging Tan's shoulder and with a smirk challenging him to race to his grandfather's house. All right, and that's the end of chapter 1 of Seeking. This fic is completed on AO3, so hopefully I can get chapter 2 out for you pretty soon. But if you just can't wait, you can go and read it there on AO3. I will have a link down in the description, or you can just search my account, BLovelyAndGLam, on AO3, and it should pop up. All right, I hope to see you again in chapter 2. Thank you.